And I assume James, let me just see if I see
James,
James.
James may be a couple minutes late. He's
Oh,
having trouble getting into the office.
oh, okay, perfect. All right, Martin, we can kick off.
I believe so. We have one or two board members who are probably just coming back, but we'll just give it 30 seconds.
If you give it a minute, Tom, we had our private session, preparation session, and some of our internal business. And as you know, when it's online, some people are in different days of the week and different times of the day. So we just had a quick 10-minute coffee break. So let's just see if everybody's back, and then we can go.
Absolutely. Well, we're not having a coffee break here yet. We're just having coffee to wake up.
Yeah, I know the feeling. While we were having the private session, they were servicing air conditioners and putting it on freezing cold. So I was sitting here freezing. At least those guys are gone now. In the meantime, Tom, before we start recording for the public session, we also have a new board member, which you might see on screen. Han is our new board member from South Korea. We are very happy to have him, and you'll meet him face to face in April. Martin, I think we can go. I think I see everybody's faces. Am I missing somebody? I think we're ready to go. So we're in the public session. Thank you very much and welcome, as always, to the IAASB. We, Tom, as usual, had our preparation session where we spoke about what was dealt with at your December board meeting. We had very good feedback, of course, from Philippe. We had a debrief from Philippe in December, and we also had some feedback from him now. I'm not going to preempt any of those things. We've seen your report, and I'm first going to allow you to just go through the key points that you would like to make, and then maybe we can give you feedback on one or two things from our side. But over to you. Thank you very much, Tom.
Thank you. First of all, good morning to everyone. As you can see from the windows, it's still dark. I can tell you we don't need air conditioning, Linda. It's cold. It's 15 degrees, and I don't mean centigrade right now. But coffee and this conversation will get me going for the day. And happy 2025 to everyone. So you have my written report, which is sort of a hybrid third quarter, fourth quarter report. But also we sent some slides as a pre-read. I do not intend to go through all the slides today in detail, but it was meant to give you a sense of these technical issues that we're dealing, how we responded to the public interest issues on the three projects that you asked us to cover today. Before I start on those specifically, though, you may have seen an article that I wrote earlier this week, and I think that really provides you good context of what we at the IAASB are doing in the context of our strategic objectives of the board. And I sort of put it in this way, is that our goals this year are to finish what we started, recognizing all the work that has been done over the last year by us, by Gabriella, and all the other standard setters and regulators out there, give the market time to digest and support the market in its effective implementation to the best extent possible. And then thirdly, allowing ourselves now, while the market's absorbing that, to intensify our focus on technology to enhance audit and assurance quality. And those are the three things that we need to do, in my mind, to keep our standards relevant, to make sure that the profession is attractive, and to ensure that audit and assurance work remains valued long into the future. And I really think that's important because sometimes we get lost in the technical details, but we're doing this for a purpose. And I think that is our purpose, to make sure that audits are valued, that the profession is attractive, and that our standards are relevant. And so I think just when you think about what we're trying to finish, like it's important that we finish what we started so we could do the other stuff that's happened. So as I said, today's presentation and the presentation that you have really focuses on the finishing what we have started. Some of it is sort of finished, some of it is near finished, some of it has a little bit more to go. And so if you think about the slides, turn to listed entity and PI track 2, the status after our December 2024 meeting. At the last in-person session in Madrid, we discussed the technical decisions that were in front of the board and the options for it. So my goal is not to rehash all of it, but it's to reassure this board that if you look at slide 5 of the deck, that we've accomplished many of the key project objectives that we set out from the start, including alignment of terminology and concepts. The one area that people focus on that we did not advance from the exposure draft is the adoption of the definition of PI in our standard, and therefore we don't extend the requirements that existed for previously for listed entities to PIs. Now, what we do have at the December meeting, and we are going to clearly articulate it, is a clearly defined commitment both to monitor the adoption of the PI definition globally in conjunction with IESBA, and an expressed desire to expand differential requirements to PI when a global baseline is realized actually. And we have finally set out an agreed process for further consultation and communication. And so if you turn to slide 6, I know this was a due process point that the PIOB was particularly interested in, that we will have a consultation period with an invitation to comment that explains what we have done, why we have done it, why it's the only solution available to us in the context of our public interest framework, and what our outlook is to get to our ultimate objective. On slide 7, you have an overview of what the timing of such a consultation, 45-day consultation, would be. But maybe what I would tell you, to give you more specificity, our plan is to publish it on February 10th, give 45 days to comment, not just leave it out there passively. We're going to send reminders to everyone who participated in the original comment period that this is up, and explain the context. We will also reach out to some SAC members too, who have an interest in this project. We have an NSS discussion, National Standard Center discussion in May, where we'll bring this up. And our expectation is to approve the final standard in June and send it to you for certification in July. Now, the timing is tight, but there's a lot of work we're going to do to prepare for the certification between now and June. Based upon what we have, we could write the draft bases for conclusions, for example, get the materials ready. So that's important. The reason why certification in July is important, because it's really important that we align the fraud, going concern, and PI enlisted entity project track 2 effective dates, because it has an impact on the auditor's report particularly. So that's our plan. We've already had some preliminary conversations where I feel optimistic about the level of support, including with the monitoring group as well, and members of the group individually, but also with other stakeholders. And I think this offers a reasonable plan for both the near term and for the longer term perspective to serve the public interest. Linda, would it be useful for me, because this was such a big topic last time, for me to pause here, either to take comments or questions on my introduction and the PI project?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Thank you, Tom, and thanks for your feedback on this. We obviously had the discussion when we prepared for this as well. So maybe 3 comments, I would say, from our side, and then obviously if I miss something, the board members will come in if there's anything else that they want to elaborate on PI. The first one is obviously just to say, well done. We're very comfortable. You know, we were concerned about not re-exposing. I know this is not an official re-exposure by definition, but there was recognition by your board that it should go out for public consultation again, which we strongly support, because we were worried that based on what was exposed before in the comments and where it ended, it is for many reasons very different. So we're very comfortable that the board decided to go that way, and thank you for that. I know it also took a lot of leadership from your side, so thank you very much for that. To play, maybe before I make that comment, maybe just also on in our preparation, we said, considering how this has shifted, considering the fact that you rightfully say that you don't want different interpretations, different levels of ISA in different jurisdictions, which is absolutely sensible and fair. But in a way, if you think about the IESBA standard, it almost allows for a jurisdictional overlay, and therefore on the ethics side it is probably very different from one jurisdiction to the next when it comes to who's included in the PI definition and who not. And therefore when you put this out for consultation, you said on the 10th of February, it is going to probably be really important how you nuance this, because this can be played down as a very simple and small change to the ISIS, which you can argue it is. But in the bigger scheme of things and looking at things from a higher level helicopter view perspective, there are actually really important nuances that you want to make sure that commentators know and understand and see the picture. So I do believe it is very important that it's not just downplayed, and it's a comment that the board members made, that it's not downplayed, but that you really actually make sure that people comment on all of this and the potential inherent nuance between this and the PI definition and the interpretation from the IESBA side. What goes with that over time is going to be really interesting to see how the market really picks up on this and the impact of this on the market, you know, when it comes to the changes to the ISIS, but also similarly we know that the IESBA plans to do a post-implementation review. So I think all of those things and the coordination between the two boards in the medium term for that is, when it comes to that, is really important. And then the last comment, and it might be a purely academic comment, but it is something that we discussed as we prepared. You said that you've already started having early discussions with stakeholders, regulators, and so on, and it seems as if there's quite a level of agreement and acceptance and support for what you're proposing. But to play devil's advocate, is there a chance, and how are you thinking about it as a board, if there is quite significant disagreement or differing views when it comes when it goes through the public consultation? Just your thinking around that. So I'll pause there for now. Maybe you want to respond, and then in the meantime, if board members have got specific comments and questions, I'll wait for their hands. So back to you, Tom.
Thank you, Linda. So first of all, I'll take all 3 comments. So thank you for the support for where we are in the consultation. On the jurisdictional matter in IESBA, first of all, we're going to be very clear that the ethics and independence requirements are not something we're consulting on. And that is part of the reason, as you remember, why we we didn't go with our original option because we would de facto been the ethics and audit standard setter. The ethics and independent standard setter, which is not our goal here. We would have been setting requirements beyond what IESBA had. We're going to explain how it interacts. Remember, our standard primarily works with the IESBA code, but it works with other ethics codes as well. And what we were concerned about, remember, with option 2 is the lowering from a baseline base and the lack of knowledge about going up and down. Our standards have always been topped up. But what users need to expect is a minimum level of requirements and in an understanding of what that requirements are. So, I understand the nuances, but I just wanted to make that point, and we're going to be very clear about what we're trying to do and what we're not. Remember, this is actually a step up from where we are. Track 2 today, we're with listed entities on these currently 6, but soon to be 8 differential requirements with fraud and going concern. And that relates to the auditor reporting elements. Publicly traded entities is a slightly larger universe. So we'll be very clear upon that. If there's a real level of disagreement, clearly we have to assess what to do next. I don't prejudge the outcome of our consultation, so we'll have to judge, but I will tell you option 2 will never be on the table for this board. Like, we'll be clear on that. And for all the reasons that we described, it's a non-starter for us, and sometimes standard setters and regulators have to make difficult choices, but maybe there's some brilliant ideas out there that we haven't considered, and we're humble enough to look for it. It will potentially change some of the timing issues, though, and impact implementation, and then we would have to consider in a time period where we stick with listed entities for our projects, our differential requirements, which wouldn't be the end of the world, because the world has lived with it fine, and the amount of differential requirements is quite limited, as I've said on multiple occasions. So I hope that gives you a sense of where we are and how we would think about all of those things.
Thank you, Tom. I don't have hands, so I think we can continue. Back to you.
Okay, so going concern. So most importantly, it's almost the ball is in your court. Not quite yet. We approved the going concern standard in December, and we are now working on the package to send to the PIOB. We knew you had a lot of work to be done to get ready for this meeting. There was no rush. It'll be ready for the April meeting, and hopefully it'll be ready for certification then. I think if you think about your role in assessing where we are on this project, first of all is, have we met the project objectives? Or were they very clear up front? And have we had a robust due process, which is not just in form, but in substance? And I think if you look at slide 9, you can see that we've spent a lot of time on this. It started with just our information and gathering. We were very clear about the issues that we were going to put on the agenda for fraud and going concern. And we've done a lot of outreach, significant input from a wide range of constituents on this one, 78 comment letters. We've done 20 plus outreach meetings related to this, the feedback on ED 570. We've talked about this with our stakeholder advisory council. I believe that this has been a deep and very useful process. importantly, I know you always ask this, is that because from time to time we did not get huge input from the user community, we went out specifically and talked about examples, and particularly as it relates to the auditor's report and what we were trying to get done there. So I'm going to possibly take what has been written in the slides on slides 10, 11, and 12 as read by you. What we tried to be was pretty comprehensive about how we responded specifically to the public interest issues that the PIOB has raised. And I think we've been very faithful to them. I think I'll leave those aside, but to permit questions. But just so you know, as I said, our plan is to send it for certification and publish in April. And then to have an effective date in December, which would align, again, with fraud, going concern, and assuming nothing is, we learn nothing very radical on high enlisted entity, all would go together. We would support this, of course, with a fact sheet and update FAQs, our videos, so our normal support for an important standard, and continue to do outreach and highlight the impact of this, particularly for users who will get much more robust information about the work of the auditor in relation to going concern. So I'll pause there.
Thank you, Tom. And as you know, this has been a very big topic for us and something that we always said was a very high priority. And thank you for your summary as well on our public interest issues. We've tracked it with keen interest. We raised some difficult issues over the couple of years that you were busy with it. But believe it or not, it's not because we don't think it's important, but I don't have any comments to bring to you, because I do believe that we're quite comfortable that this is significantly moving things forward and shifting the needle. So unless any of the board members have any questions that you want to ask Tom about this, I think we can move on. Thanks, Tom.
That's super. Thank you. So in the last but not least area of finishing what we started, and what I mean that is finishing what we had started as part of our work plan middle of last year, is fraud. And I think it's really important just to ground people again, particularly since you have a new member here, on what we were trying to do with this project and why it was so important. First of all, we were not trying to reframe the role of an auditor here. What we've been trying to do is address the expectation gap issue in the context of the existing role of the auditor in a way that gives further confidence in that role and reaffirms that role. So the way I thought about it and the way our board has thought about it is, the first thing is you have to be very clear about what the role of the auditor is in relation to fraud. And Janine and others have heard me say this a lot, is like the existing ISA 240 is basically filled with what you can't expect an auditor to do up front, which sets the wrong tone in relation to the auditor's role. And then you need to promote the type of behavior and facilitate effective response to identified risks of material misstatements. And this really is building upon our groundbreaking work on 315. And then bringing a very clear fraud lens to it. So define what you're supposed to do, start defining how you're going to do it. And then in doing that, reinforcing the role of professional skepticism throughout, So this goes to not assuming or taking for granted situations, not just accepted, but having this really independent, rigorous mindset throughout the audit. And then when you're done with that, communicating what you've done, both to those who are charged with governance and to the external community in the auditor's report. And that's really what this has been from day one. And when we get to a vote in March, we will ask ourselves, have we accomplished those objectives? And I am pretty confident, we've talked about it with this board many times, that we were aligned on those objectives. And so, we just reiterate that on slide 16, which is sort of how we execute on those objectives. And then we go into more detail about our response to the public interest issues raised. Now, as you know, we've decided to use CAMS as the filtering mechanism for fraud. We've talked about this many a time, but this is the reason for it, is because it does provide a filtering mechanism that's well accepted in the marketplace, and it's often hard to disaggregate error due to fraud. Risk due to fraud or error. So it gives an opportunity to have a more cohesive, coherent auditor's report, and it provides a degree of scalability in the requirements because CAMS now apply to listed entities, likely to apply to publicly traded entities in the future. Now, what I do want to do is go to on slide 18. There's this one area which I know we've heard from this board many times on about the auditor's role with respect to authenticity of documents, because this is a nuanced point. Our project addresses the fraud standard. The issue of authenticity of documents is pervasive to our whole standards because it deals with ISA 200. What we have done is done what we can in the context of this project. And to be clear, we've strengthened the conditional requirement, which deals with the authenticity of documents, i.e., if the conditions are identified that raise questions about the authenticity of documents, the auditor must investigate further. We've really enhanced the application material about identifying those conditions that indicate potential inauthenticity of documents. And it was one of the instructions to our board to our task force from the board was to strengthen that further in December. And as part of the audit evidence and risk response project, the team will investigate issues related to broader authenticity as part of that project. Changing or removing the language from ISA 200 would be a scope expansion of this project, which would necessarily require re-exposure in our minds. And so our focus is to let this question of professional skepticism and the work related to authenticity take place as much as we can within the 240. I think we've removed the language in 240 that suggests that you could accept documentation without all this assessment. And I think it provides us the best path forward, combined with the work that we're going to do on audit evidence and risk response going forward, where then we could have a real discussion with our stakeholders and not risk re-exposure on this ISA 240 project. So I wanted to highlight that. That seems to be a little bit of the one sticking point maybe in some of your minds? Like our plan now is to go forward with the approval in March with the same effective date as going concern. Between now and then, we are always going to do further outreach with stakeholders. And there's going to be more consultation both between us and IESBA and our other consultation groups. So I think that may be a good spot to pause, Linda.
Thanks very much for that, Tom, and it's all very clear and similar to going concern. Fraud is, as you know, been a really, really important project in our minds as well. It is the one place where there can really be a further shift of the needle when it comes to, that typical question that often unfairly gets asked when there's a fraud in a company, and that is where was the auditor? We've had many discussions. I know I've personally had many discussions with people from within the profession that were very worried that this might take the audit further into a forensic audit, and that's not the objective. But having a mechanism that there's reporting in the audit report on a factual basis, that there were typical fraud indicators and how auditors dealt with it, that's really important. I think it's going to be really important for you as a board with this, as well as with going concern, to think about communication and how do you make sure that users out there, and I'm thinking about Sandy's investor community, actually understand that this is really moving the needle. Yes, it's not changing an audit into a forensic audit, but there are very strong, better, clearer requirements that make sure that misstatement due to fraud and misstatement due to error get the same attention, and that's really important, and I don't think you should downplay the importance of this. And similarly, there are very good transparency requirements, and the change in language from all the things that the auditor doesn't have to do and twisting it around to what they should be doing is a significant step forward. And I do believe it's important to make sure that, yes, this is not a forensic audit, that's the communication, but this is not just moving the deck chairs around. And that's very, very important, because this and going concern are the two areas where we always hear the questions, but why did the auditor miss this? And we know that's an unfair question in many instances, but there is a very significant public interest response in what you've done here. So it's really important, and we are looking forward to seeing it. I see I've got a hand from Tom, so I'm going to circle back to him and then back to you again, Tom. The other
thank
Tom.
you. Okay, thank you very much, Chair. One small question is that concerning the PIOB's remit. It's some sort of the oversight. And at the same time, we are paying attention to the nomination and the composition of SSB. And as for the IAASB's composition, you have the new member, quite a lot of new member from next meeting. It means, and at the same time, as I say, that's the new this standard of the floor is really, really critical for the capital market as a whole. So you have to, are you planning to give some sort of the educational session or how can I say, educational session for the new members, because to get the bottom of this new standard, as you explained, you have a long history and you have a long discussion, and the ED and the final document is the discussion around them is really, really critical. So I think that you need some sort of the further educational session for new members to facilitate their real understanding of the new standard, the importance of new standard. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. It's real good point. We do have 4 new board members joining us. So the first good part was 2 of the new board members attended our December meeting, were part of that our discussions. So that was really helpful, and means that they're up to speed on the decisions. Secondly, we are holding educational discussions on with the new board members and doing a full orientation, as we always do, on the open project. So they'll be fully debriefed. And then the final thing is just a note on how we operate with new board members who are required to take a vote at the end of the project. Is that the basic principle is that you trust the process to where we've gotten to that point, and do not reopen issues that have been effectively resolved. Just like our old board members don't do that either. It's like you move on unless you find a fatal flaw or something that's come to your attention that means that the current decision is unworkable. So I think when you think about all those three things, I think we expect a smooth transition on this. The other two that weren't able to attend our meeting, I think have followed the project for some time. Nancy's a very experienced standard setter as well, having been the vice chair of the Canadian board and had followed our project quite a bit from that perspective.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks for that, and that's good to know. Thanks, Tom and Tom. Anything else from your side, Tom? I've got one more question, but I just want to check. It's not to do with these, but just one more comment or question to ask. I just first want to check if there's something else that you wanted to cover in your presentation.
No, I think I've covered it all, and I also, I just want to go back to what I said at the start. And I think this is important for all of us in the standard setting ecosystem, is the recognition that the two boards have proven that we can respond in an agile way to key public interest issues. But a lot has occurred in the environment right now, and recognition like that the speed of approvals from our perspective is going to slow, not the work that we're doing, because we need to allow the market a little bit of calm to implement our standards, and we stand behind it. And so that is a big thing. And I think, as a standard setter, you have to manage the pace of adoption all the time. And, you don't want to exhaust the marketplace. That's not just dealing with our standards, but dealing with ISSBs, IAASBs, regulatory initiatives. So I'm very conscious of that going forward. And it's a message that while we're not slowing our work in general, and we're dealing with major public interest, the rate of approvals now will need to slow from our standpoint, necessarily because we've effectively cleared the decks.
It's a really important point that you're raising, Tom, because we can sometimes push so hard and run so fast, and we don't actually stand back and think about the implications out there. Yes, we do want to be responsive, all of us, in this bigger standard setting construct, but responsiveness sometimes also means to slow things down when you need to. We just gone through, we still need to do a little bit of work on and analyzing it and thinking about our actions, gone through a board assessment process, and as part of that process we also got some input from, it was independently run, but input from our stakeholders, and there was one comment that sort of hit home to me that's linked to your comment, and that is, how are we thinking about at the PIOB the risk of new standards or standard setting fatigue? Because all of these new standards are sprung up on assurance providers, preparers, investors, and so on. And I think that's the one thing that we don't actually really apply our minds to. So your view and your board's view on, let's finish what's on our plate, but let's also now give the market time to digest, and while they digesting, you're not going to rest on your laurels. You're going to start doing some work, you said, on thinking about the technology side of things and doing some work on audit quality and so on. I think that's a really important and a wise decision. So thanks for that. My only last comment, unless my board members have anything further, is just taking a step back as we now get to the place where we also asked to certify the IESBA sustainability suite of standards. Yours obviously have been certified, and I just think it's really important for us as the PIOB to emphasize, and I know it's on your radar screen and it's important, but we will not be doing our job if we don't say, please think about very carefully and keep your eye on your monitoring process. At our next meeting, it would be useful for us to understand a little bit more what are those monitoring mechanisms that you've put in place to consider potential unintended consequences of this very new standard that's new for everybody. What are some of the problems that might pop out, but very importantly also, how are you thinking about, let's call it rapid response if it's urgent and important to do that. So just again emphasizing the importance of that in the very new area of sustainability. So I'll hand back to you for any final comments on this, and then we can wrap up.
Well, that's a really good point, Linda. It's something very much on my mind. In fact, amongst me and the team, and Gabriella and I have been discussing about it, so we're on pretty parallel tracks on this, is that we're thinking about having created a technical implementation group, which would be a rapid response mechanism. This group would probably be people who are actually getting their hands dirty in the implementation of it, and then could provide us feedback. To some extent, it's the natural evolution of our reference groups, but it would be smaller. And so we're working through the construct. One of the things, speaking of implementation, that we're very focused on right now, which is why it's on in place, is that on the 27th, Gabriella's side and mine are getting together on a joint launch where we're going to issue, we at the IAASB are going to issue our first batch of implementation materials and videos on that date. So very much on our mind. We also have other mechanisms. If we're going to have that technical getting their hands dirty group, we'll also have the national standard setters. That will be a separate exercise. We'll also have regular contacts with firms, and we also have the SAC. And I don't want to say that there's only one group to help us monitor, because it's going to be multi-faceted, but we are very much having that on our mind, and in a ways that is coordinated with IESBA.
Thanks, Tom. And I see Mark's hand is up. I suspect he wants to ask you a little bit more about this and the communication around it. Mark, over to you.
Yes, thanks, Linda. Yeah, indeed, you read my mind. We almost managed to get through this this session without mentioning the S word, but sustainability comes in right at the end. I just had a question about the joint launch, Tom. Yes. Obviously, it's a little over 10 days away now. I just wanted to ask about the format for that. Where it has been publicized, and both you and Gabriella, happy that you're going to get enough of your sort of important stakeholders joining that event?
Well, there's no event per se, so it's not like a launch event, but we will be launching it on our site with videos and a number of stakeholders who have made videos for it, and we'll publicize it. There'll be lots of materials that we're posting on that date. Gabriella's on the phone too, so she could add more specifically, but I am very comfortable that we will drive attention around the launch, and that it will be comprehensive and high quality. We've been working hard on this. Lots of materials being developed behind the scene, videos, etc. And so I feel comfortable with it, but it's not, how should I say this? it's an important start, but it's not the end all be all too. This is going to be a sustained effort over time as well.
Thank you, Tom. And it's clearly not, Mark, as we thought, maybe like the excitement of a SpaceX rocket launch. But
As
it will
much
be
as we love this stuff.
all right, Tom, thank you very much. Thanks to you and Willie and James. Thanks for your time, and thanks for the feedback. We wish you well for the year, and it's certainly going to be an interesting year, hopefully a year of standing back, as you say, and regrouping and just thinking where you are now, do we take things forward. So thank you very much for that. And with that, I can close the session with the IAASB. And you're welcome, of course, Tom, if you want to hang on as an observer for the certification session, all of you. So you're welcome to do that. Okay, Martin, I believe we can move on. It brings us to a very important session when it comes to the IESBA certification of the two IESBA standards, sustainability standard. We're going to deal with them separately, and then after that, we're going to deal separately with the expert standard. Maybe just to give you a little bit of an indication of how I intend dealing with this, I'm going to hand over to the staff. We've done significant preparation work as a board, as you all know, and maybe just for the benefit of Gabriella and other observers, we have spent our time, applied our mind. We have preparation sessions for this, and we have briefings and debriefings after meetings. So we've done quite a lot of work, and then we go ask the staff to go back and prepare for us a summary of the whole project and where we are, and how our public interest issues have been dealt with, which we work through and discuss. I am, for the sake of the public session, going to ask Martin and the oversight staff to just take us at a high level through their assessment of the public interest issues and the summary and their recommendation. And then obviously we will ask the PIOB members to confirm their support. And I'll talk a little bit about the more detailed process and where we are with that as well. So over to you, Martin, and from you, I would imagine we're probably going to ask Pavel to talk to us at a high level about the sustainability standard. Thanks.
Thank you, Linda. And I think actually we will move directly to Pavel. We've prepared together with Nerea and Pavel in a very coordinated way. So Pavel, would you take the floor, please?
Thank you. Hopefully you can hear me. Yep. Okay, so we have come to this certification step in relation to the IESBA sustainability standard, to give its full name, International Ethics Standards for Sustainability, including international independence standards and sustainability assurance and RIA.
We're battling to hear you. Maybe switch
Can you
your
hear
video.
me?
Yeah, we're battling. It's breaking up. So maybe if you switch your video off.
Let's try it again. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So we have come to the certification step in relation to the IESBA sustainability assurance, including, again, no?
No, we're battling, Pavel. It's breaking up terribly.
Okay. Should, Linda, with your permission, we'll just take a 30-second pause and we see if we can just sort out technically. It just seems to be an issue that's just arisen.
Okay,
if you just give us 30 seconds.
We'll just hang in here and take a minute to see if we can sort it out.
Yeah. Just jump online.
Pavel, are you back on?
Yeah, hopefully. So
Yes, that sounds a lot better already.
Hear me now?
Perfectly, yes.
Okay, okay,
Okay, thank you.
perfect.
Let's start from scratch again.
Let's start from scratch. So we have come to this certification step in relation to the IESBA sustainability name International Ethics Standards, including international standards and other revisions to the code relating to sustainability assurance and reporting.
Pavel, I'm afraid you're gonna please switch your video off. I think that
here I'm going, and we have
Martin,
some technical problem here. I just
Martin, let's move
Yes.
Pavel to your office. Can
Yes,
Pavel
that's what I was just suggesting. So if I just ask for everyone's patience, we will just take possibly a minute and we'll just try to reboot that from a different room. For some reason, it's just arisen in the last minute or two. So if we can just ask everyone just for a little bit of patience.
through the whole series of meetings since yesterday, we didn't have this problem. So maybe you can just sit at your desk, Martin. We wait for a minute.
Okay.
okay, so hopefully this will work.
There we go. Let's try. Third time lucky, Pavel.
Thank you. So I will provide a short summary of the principal aspects and conclusions of the PIOB staff, as well as our recommendation for the board in respect of the certification of the standard to enable the following voting procedure. In terms of documentation, we confirm that we have received the full required documentation package for the certification, which is consisting of the cover note on the certification, final pronouncement of the standard as approved by IESBA, basis for conclusion document, due process checklist, also draft minutes of the IESBA December 2024 meeting when the final provisions were approved. And also public written statement by the IESBA that the standard has been developed in accordance with agreed due process and is responsive to the public interest informed by the concepts and principles of the public interest framework, which is being implemented in the standard setting process. All these documents are included in the board's documentation package, and they have been duly considered as presented in the analysis of public interest responsiveness document, the document prepared by the PIOB staff for board consideration. In respect of the due process, the PIOB has overseen the standard setting process throughout the full development cycle of the standard, and we confirm that the standard due process was followed. The standard approved by IESBA is the result of public consultation process and discussion at IESBA meetings and interaction with the PIOB and other stakeholders, specifically comments raised by respondents to the exposure draft in 89 comment letters that were received, as well as comments provided by the PIOB as reflected in the public interest issues document. These comments were documented in various issues papers and considered at the IESBA various meetings. Subsequently, the issue papers and the basis for conclusion document explain the rationale of the IESBA for addressing the comments received in a satisfactory manner. Overall, we have concluded that the standard meets the public interest framework qualitative characteristics in the context where the sustainability reporting and assurance are at the starting point of a long journey ahead, and that careful judgment of competing public interest priorities was necessarily required. On the basis of analysis and consideration of extensive board discussions, our conclusion also acknowledges that there is more work to do. So in this context, some public interest issues which we raised during the process remain for ongoing attention as they relate to specific characteristics of clarity, conciseness, scope, scalability, comprehensiveness, and implementability of the standard. Specifically, the following three areas remain for attention, and we have already the IESBA's chair's commitment to address them. Number one is the creation of full level playing field for professional accountants and other practitioners by extending the scope of Part 4B of the code, which is committed by IESBA within the current strategy and work plan. Secondly, strengthening of communication between various assurance providers in cases of non-compliance with legislation and regulations, which is again committed by IESBA to be addressed in the NOCLAR post-implementation review, which should start in 2025. And thirdly, is the creation of a monitoring and quick response mechanism to address any implementation challenges of the new standard, keeping an eye on the evolution of assurance practice generally and particularly in relation to value chain component independence clauses which have been deferred for 18 months. And again, IESBA has committed to put in place such a monitoring mechanism. So having mentioned these areas, it is important to be clear that our conclusion is positive with respect to certification on the basis of responsiveness to the public interest. The market and the regulatory community called for sustainability, ethical and independent standard, and the IESBA has delivered the standard which will address key public interest in a fast-track manner before the end of 2024, as it had committed before. So we have acknowledged the time constraints given and the public interest of timeliness in delivering this standard. In our analysis, we also acknowledge that this standard would benefit from fine-tuning and other follow-up work arising from experience gathered in the implementation period. We recognize that we objectively do not possess and cannot possess all knowledge regarding many aspects, specifically about the value chain components. We also recognize that there is newness in the whole system of sustainability reporting and assurance, and this newness is objectively complex. Therefore, it is inevitable that the standard may also be perceived as complex, and it will require monitoring, clarifying, and educational efforts, specifically aiming to other practitioners who are not professional accountants. However, the conclusion remains in favor of certification, as the standard provides the key global baseline that markets and regulators need and is therefore in public interest. We believe the standard should be put into practice now, at this moment, and see what and how subsequently should be improved upon. Therefore, in our partial conclusions in relation to the various public interest issues, we considered competing public interest priorities, which lead us to an overall conclusion about the recommendation to the board, which arises from extensive interactions as the board has had on it. And the recommendation of the PIOB staff to the PIOB board is to certify the approval of the standard with the following concluding wording. Now I'm citing, the PIOB considers that the standard has been developed in a manner consistent with agreed due process, The PIOB also considers that the standard is responsive to the public interest, informed by the concepts and principles of the public interest framework. Now, back to you, Linda.
Thank you very much, Pavel, and thank you. I thought Pavel very well when we finally could hear him very well expressed all the discussions and debates and conclusions we had in the past couple of days as IESBA, after IESBA approved the standard, but also throughout the project. And without repeating all of that, maybe just before I ask the board members to vote on the certification, maybe just the short version summary in our minds as board, based on some of our discussions and our conclusions yesterday in our preparation as well. We've given that feedback to Gabriela for anybody that wants to watch the recording on the public session with IESBA yesterday. Firstly, the PIOB has strongly supported this project to get onto the strategy and work plan of IESBA. It's a really important project, and there's a huge need for that. It's inconceivable to have a sustainability assurance standard without thinking about the very important ethics issues when it comes to independence, for example, of assurance providers, when it comes to the ethical behavior of preparers of sustainability reports. And therefore it was very important, secondly, for this also to be timely and aligned with the issuance of the assurance standard. We've seen the call in Europe for assurance and the need for a standard to be ready now. We've seen the call from regulators such as OSCO and the Financial Stability Board for these two sets of standards on the assurance side and the ethics side to be available simultaneously. So both of these processes and projects were very timely. What happened, we have applied our mind as always throughout the process, not just is there something to be on the agenda? We raised public issues with you, Gabriela. You gave us feedback quarterly as we went through our report back with you. So thank you very much for that. We had a very strong push, and I want to recognize that, Gabriela, from the PIOB side on the importance of aligning terminology between the two standard setting boards. And there was a significant leadership step forward from yourself and Tom to make sure that that happens, and that took away one of the big concerns of creating disparity. So a really important project that was very well tracked throughout. We recognized yesterday, and we mentioned to Gabriela, that when there's something that's so new and so greenfields, not just new in standard setting, but new in implementing when it comes to reporting, and you add to that a very challenging timeline, it is inevitable that you get to the place where you say, well, we need to get this out and it's important, but you know what, there will always, especially in such a new area, be room for improvement. It is, there calls out there that it's complex, it is complex, it's a complex subject matter, and inevitably the standard will be complex. When it comes to standards like that, over time, as it gets refined and mature, there will be room for greater clarity, simplicity in language, and there is that recognition. There's also recognition, and Pavel expressed it well, that yes, there might be implementation challenges, but you can't not issue a standard because there might be implementation challenges. You will only learn what they are once you start implementing. There was quite a lot of questions around and difficulties and pointers around the value chain components, and that in itself is a really important area to start implementing so that you can see the reality of what they are and whether some changes. So we recognize, Gabriella, the work that you've also done in this regard when it comes to creating the transitional measure, but not just the transitional measure, a transitional measure with a fallback position to go back to the fundamental principles, the conceptual framework, and see what comes out of it. And therein lies the importance which you've recognized of creating this mechanism to monitor implementation and this mechanism to make quick changes where necessary or changes over time as required. And as the PIOB, we will also track and follow the working of that mechanism and the actions that come out of those mechanisms with a very watchful and careful eye. That, with the public interest issues that we've mentioned that you've agreed is something that will probably go into the next round of changes, is something that will definitely remain on our public interest list. And lastly, you spoke when we spoke yesterday about the need over time to also issue guidance, issue fact sheets, and all of those things. So all of those things are really important. So we've recognized all of these potential challenges, potential changes, which is inevitable when it comes to something so new and something so important. I'm going to pause there and I'm going to ask the board members, are there any last comments or questions? And if not, whether you're ready to vote on the certification of this. I'm just waiting. If there are no hands, I'm going to ask you to vote. Okay, can I ask the board members, we're talking just about the sustainability standard. We're going to deal separately with the experts. If you're comfortable by the raise of the hand or a thumbs up, that's the difficulty in an online meeting. If you support the standard for certification. All right. Anybody against? Thank you very much. Our work is not done. Pavel, we go back to you to talk to us about experts.
Thank you. So we have now come to the certification step in relation to IESBA standard using the work of an external expert. And again, I will provide a short summary of the principal aspects and conclusion of the PIOB staff, as well as our recommendation for the board in respect of the certification of this standard to enable the following voting procedure. In terms of documentation, we confirm that we have received the full required documentation package for the certification, which has been included among the papers for this board meeting as well. All these documents that have been duly considered and analyzed in the paper prepared by the PIOB staff for the board consideration, namely the analysis of public interest responsiveness document. In respect of the due process, the PIOB has overseen the standard setting process throughout the full development cycle of the standard, and we confirm that the standard followed the due process. The standard approved by the IESBA is a result of public consultation process, discussions at IESBA meetings, and interaction with the PIOB and other stakeholders, specifically comments raised by respondents to the exposure draft in 64 comment letters that were received, as well as comments provided by the PIOB as reflected in our public interest issues documents. These comments were documented in various issues papers considered at IESBA meetings. Subsequently, these issue papers and the basis for conclusion document explain the rationale of the IESBA for addressing the comments received in a satisfactory manner. Overall, the PIOB staff concluded that the standards meets all the key public interest framework qualitative characteristics. In terms of the PIOB's public interest issue, we can conclude, based on our analysis, that overall, the public interest issue has been addressed to a full extent, specifically regarding the following aspects. One, the clarity of the scope and definitions used by the standard. Second, resolution of the situation of using multiple experts. Third, presence of prohibition clauses when the expert's competence, capabilities, and objectivity has been evaluated as not sufficient. What we perceive as a necessary feature is the interoperability of the standard with the rest of the code, as well as with technical auditing and assurance standards, namely ISA 5000 on sustainability assurance and ISA 620 on using experts. Here we have noted that these standards must undergo limited narrow scope amendments in near future. We also acknowledge that a stand-back exercise was performed with the standard to evaluate whether all requirements by themselves without any application material would cover all aspects that should be required to drive the expected and required behaviors in the public interest. Therefore, all the mentioned individual conclusions about compliance with the due process, that the standard has addressed various aspects of our PIOB's public interest issue, as well as achievement of the qualitative characteristic of the public interest framework, lead us to an overall conclusion about our recommendation to the board, and the recommendation of the PIOB staff to the PIOB board is to certify the approval of this standard with the following concluding wording. The PIOB considers that the standard has been developed in a manner consistent with agreed due process. The PIOB also considers that the standard is responsive to the public interest, informed by the concepts and principles of the public interest framework. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Pavel. And experts form a very important part of sustainability. It's probably the one area more so than anything else where assurance providers will have to refer to the work of experts, and hence the importance of having ethics standards to deal with that. Can I just again check with board members if you have any outstanding questions or comments, and if not, whether we can take a vote? Okay, I don't see any hands, so can I again ask you by the show of a thumbs up or a support whether you support the standard? Anybody against? Okay, thank you. Let the record then show that both of these standards have been certified by the PIOB. Gabriella, well done to you and your board. This has been a really tough journey with very, very tight timelines. Probably much harder on the ethics side because it was completely uncharted waters. Very well done. And we are looking forward with keen interest also to see what comes out of this implementation period. We do know that for both boards, this is actually the start of a journey. I think there's going to be quite a lot still to follow when it comes to sustainability, which has become a really important, obvious important topic in the market. So very well done to you.
Thank you very much, Linda. You know, it's really an important moment for us. And as you say, the start of another journey, probably more difficult than this one, but we'll hear for that. Thank you. It's really... And
I would recommend that you and the staff take a day or two off to celebrate after all the hard work before you tackle the next round and the next phase. So very well done. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll think about it. Thank you.
All right, all that then remains for us to be done is we've got one or two last approvals, nothing as exciting as certifying new standards, but let's just get that business out of the way as well. If I can go to agenda item number 15 on our side, which is the approval of the minutes of the last public session at our October meeting. So it's our technical committee minutes of the 80th meeting. Can I just check if there are any corrections from anybody? If it's just pure editorial, as always, it must please just go directly to Martin. Or if you have any other more fundamental comments, you can raise it now. If there's nothing, can I... Sorry, who was... I'm just checking this. Okay, let me try. We had an echo. Can I check by the show of hands if you support the minutes? Everybody comfortable? Okay, so the minutes are approved. And then lastly, Martin, can you just go to the items for noting?
Thank you, Linda. Sorry, just a little improvisation here as we just dealt with those technical issues. So really nothing very much to cover other than just to confirm that the PIOB calendar for 2025 and the allocation of our observers, both for the SSB meetings and also for the meeting of the Stakeholder Advisory Council have now been confirmed, as have been confirmed, obviously, our own board meetings through the course of the year, and that information will be made available on our website. So from my side, Linda, I think that's all I have to cover, unless there are, of course, any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions to Martin? I think that's all clear, and thank you as we wrap that up at the end of the year end of last year to make sure that everybody knows where they need it and when. Dave?
Linda, thank you very much, and Martin, thanks for that. Just a quick request: the schedule that is on page 599 in the board pack, if we could get that outside of board intelligence, just so we can have it for reference, that would be great.
Yeah, good idea. Maybe we can just email it, please, Martin, to everybody.
We will certainly do that right away.
And there will be diary invites, I would imagine, that follow as well. Okay, I believe that concludes our public business. I'll ask board members to stay on for another minute or so in case there's anything else in the concluding private session that you want to raise. But thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for two days of hard work for many of you in difficult time zones. Thank you, and I'm looking forward to seeing everybody at the April meeting in person in Madrid, but we'll definitely be communicating with each other in between. But thank you. I'm going to close the public session and then just ask the board members and Martin to stay on for another 2 or 3 minutes, just if there's anything else that we need to wrap up on. Thank you.
Thank you very much once again, Linda and all.
Thank you, Gabriela.
See you soon. Thank you.
Congratulations again.
Bye-bye.
Bye.